This was our Odroid computer at the end of our last video. What we're going to do today is to complete the case around the Odroid itself. In order to allow access to each of the ports, I've decided to 3D print a fascia for the back of the case to allow access to all the ports. This can be slid quite neatly into the slots in the MakerBeam struts, like so. The slots in the MakerBeam struts quite easily accommodate a 2mm thick 3D print. This allows the case to look quite professional. However, there is not a great deal of airflow through this particular fascia. Most of the airflow for this case is going to be through the sides and the back. What we've done in previous builds is to use this material. This is perforated polypropylene. Quite flexible and reasonably easy to cut. It comes in much larger sheets, which can be cut to size. I'm going to be using some recycled strips from a previous build cut to size. These, with a small notch cut at the corner to accommodate the corner cubes, should slide in quite nicely. So I'll just remove one of these corner cubes to allow us to slide this into place. And if we slide this into the grooves, it should go into place quite nicely. And we can now screw this corner cube back into place. And with these in place, you'll see that the side screen fits quite nicely and doesn't move at all. I will do the same on the other side to allow this to be closed in as well, allowing airflow from the sides and the back into the main case. The next question is, how are we going to remove excess heat from this heatsink out of the box? I could have fitted fans at the side, but I have other plans for the use of this side space to fit an SSD. So what I'm going to do is to fit a Nocturne fan to the top of this heatsink, venting all the hot air from the inside of the case out through the lid. And to do this, I'm going to be using one of these acrylic tiles. These can be cut to size, and I'm going to drill holes in the top to allow our airflow. So having drilled holes in the acrylic tile, we can now bolt a very narrow Nocturne fan to this lid. This will allow us to sit this on top of the unit, and all the hot air will be sucked out through these ventilation holes. And the intake to the box will be through the sides. So the next question is, how do we actually fit this lid to the frame? What I've done before is use steel paper on the struts and magnetic tape on the lid itself. This will allow us to have a magnetic seal on the top of the unit, allowing the unit top to be moved quite easily. So let's just put the other struts into place to see how the unit will actually look when completed. So with all the frames in place, this looks like a nice solid auto unit. As you can see, we're allowing enough airflow beneath the board to cool the memory chips. This perforated polypropylene, once cut to size, can be painted with any colour you desire, as you can see from the ones we've done in previous builds. So now that we've covered the back and the sides of the unit and also the cooling on the top, where are we going to mount our SSD? If we wanted to fit either a traditional hard disk or a 2.5-inch SSD, we would obviously have issues with fitting this into the case, as there is not a great deal of room to actually fit something this large. So something of this size is not appropriate. We could of course use the M2 slot in the underneath of the board, which is what it was designed for. However, I'm saving this M2 slot for another purpose. So we're going to fit an SSD, but of the M-SATA variety. So in order to fit this into the case, I'm going to use a small converter board. This will take standard SATA power and data connections and allow you to sit a small M-SATA SSD, i.e. one of these. These will fit quite nicely into the board and can of course be screwed into place. Then all we need to do is to find a way to mount this inside the case somewhere. So we have a number of options. We have some space at the end on either side of the board. We don't want to place it on top of the board as this would obstruct the airflow. So we need to find a nice easy way of actually mounting this inside the case. So there is our SSD securely attached to its converter board. So our design task is how can we fit this securely into the board. It does have a couple of mounting holes, however, putting any kind of bolt in here would actually foul the SSD itself. So we need to do something where this can slide in, perhaps a 3D printed retaining bracket. So that's what I'm going to look at next, is designing one of those. So the final part of the case is this part here. This is going to be the front of the case. So in order to complete this, I have created a 3D print. This is designed to slide quite easily into the MakerBeam struts and give us 4 holes for ventilation, and I've put an additional hole in to allow a power switch to be slid into place. This power switch is going to have no light on it, so there'll be no distractions from the front of the unit. And after the 3D print was completed, I cut a couple of small slots out of the print in order to allow the corner pieces to fit into the struts. As you can see, this will slide in quite nicely to the front of the unit. We can now screw in our corner pieces to complete the unit. And there is the front of the case completed. So, in addition to the lid of our computer, that is the case now completed. What we'll look at in the next video is the internals, the addition of the SATA SSD, and setting up the computer for its first use. However, that's it for today. Thank you for watching.